thank you, Khaki Labs, Bharat, Amrita, and the whole team for inviting me to give this talk today. I'll start. Okay. So I'm going to begin with a little bit of background and context to, I think, many of us, especially who have either lived in Bombay for a very long time, and you will notice how I will probably keep jumping between Bombay and Mumbai, because most of this talk that I'm going to give in and the time period that I'm speaking about, the city was known as Bombay. So I am going to do that little interchange. So many of us who have either recently been living in this city or have even lived for a very long time, there has always been a degree of intrigue and curiosity about what lies beyond this very commanding and imposing long curved wall. Which is today known as Shahid Bhagat Singh Marg, but was historically known as Dockyard Road, and this iconic clock tower that you see. So this is a sort of slightly aerial view of the precinct that lies beyond these walls. But for most of us who could not and do not have the privilege to breach these walls, it's always been a bit of curiosity as to what lies beyond. And so for me, it was really what I'm going to narrate to you today is going to also, I'm going to therefore start with a little bit of a personal experience of this opportunity that I got 2 years back to redo and revamp and re-envision what was called the Heritage Hall inside the naval dockyard of Mumbai, which lies beyond the walls of the Lion Gate in the Kala Ghoda area. So this was a building from 1898, so sort of the end of the 19th century, a very typical Bombay building in basalt stone, and it has seen many lives and many stories within it. It started out as a sail loft from the era of sail and steamships in sort of stitching these sails, and then it saw a certain life and activities during the two world wars, and then eventually it lay unused and abandoned for a few years, for a few decades actually, till the Indian Navy decided to house a heritage hall talking about and charting the long history of the naval dockyard of the city. And this long history is almost a 285-year-old history, if you kind of look at it as a documented history starting from 1735. And I got the opportunity to sort of reimagine, re-envision, curate, and part of that research that I undertook is going to form a part of my talk here today. So the Heritage Hall is actually not a very large space. It's about roughly 1,200 square feet. It has a small mezzanine on the top, which can be accessed through a spiral staircase at the corner of the site. But within this sort of very compact space, we had to kind of work out ways in which to tell this story of 285 years, this sort of continual, unbroken curve, which starts from very early days when Bombay was nothing much more than just 7 islands and a natural harbour, and sort of chart that journey and come to what the Naval Dockyard Mumbai is today as one of the most advanced and cutting edge refit and repair facilities for the Indian Navy. So though what my talk is going to focus today is only going to be, because this is a very vast topic and each of these themes and zones can actually be a mini talk in itself. So I'm going to focus on certain aspects of it and not try and achieve the entire arc today. So this is eventually how the space turned out, and I'm going to focus a little more on the historical aspects of the dockyard and its legacy and its history. And as you can see, we used a balance between static and dynamic elements, interactive elements, models, etc., of sail ships of the time to create a more interesting and engaging space for visitors, dignitaries, and various delegations that have visited the dockyard in in the last 2 years. And I've also had, therefore, the opportunity of conducting curatorial tours for some of these delegations, right from the Chief of Naval Staff, for the Navy itself, for maritime enthusiasts and citizen groups of Mumbai, as well as foreign delegations who have come. But it is really, for me today, the first time that I am talking about some of this research on a public platform. The curatorial walks that I've done so far have largely been for within the dockyard itself, within the legacy gallery itself, but not on a public domain. And hence, like I said, that there were about 8 themes that I broke this down to. The first 4 kind of these themes looked at the sort of evolution, historical evolution from Bombay, its evolution from a natural harbor to a very rudimentary marine precinct, from what were the sort of parameters that led to the first dry dock in Asia being built here, which was really the golden era of about a century and a half. Who are these master craftsmen and builders who were crafting these ships in Bombay, and what was the role of the dockyard really for the British in carving and sustaining a global empire? So these 4 themes is largely what I'm going to base my talk on today, and then I'm going to culminate and end with the changeover and India becoming a republic, and the formation of the Indian Navy, so to say. I'm not going to touch so much about the modern history of the Navy, which is a lot more well known, and therefore the modern history of the dockyard itself. So just to begin at the beginning, Bombay is really a city that's been created out of water. So if we look at all the old maps, and this is one of the maps of old maps of Bombay, which I actually prefer, because it shows you not only the 7 islands, but also all the other natural features which offered an excellent deep water natural harbor, which could be used in all seasons. As a tidal estuary of bays, the landscape of these islands varied from low hills and inlets, tidal flats, mangrove forests, and salt pans, where the harbor had access to the Arabian Sea and through a navigational channel. So it was already a very ripe, a very ferment geography of a natural harbor with a good tidal range, which was waiting to be sort of tapped. And if we correlate this early map of Bombay, which you see as the inset image from the Portuguese period, and correlate that to a lithograph painting such as this, you are really able to see that the evolution of and growth of Bombay as a city, which became the famed urbs prima in India, is thus intrinsically linked to the development of its harbor. The two kind of were born and they grew simultaneously and parallelly together. The city grew through the conjuring up of land from the sea. Embankments were built, hills were flattened, the rubble dumped into marsh as urbanization processes dovetailed with maritime and imperial ambitions over the century. But of course, there were communities that were already living here, so to say, who were the native and the original indigenous inhabitants of Bombay. And though these islands at that point in time in the 15th century were under the rule of the Shah of Gujarat, they were originally inhabited by fishermen belonging to the Koli tribes. And these communities have been living and working along the coastal waters of Bombay, as well as the wider Konkan and Ratnagiri regions. And records of earlier settlement speak of Koli villages in all the 7 islands. Most of these, even today, have their traces in the form of small hamlets or gautans and continue to retain their traditional milieu. But what is important is this was a community that had a lot of embedded indigenous wisdom and knowledge of boatcraft itself. And these two specific typologies of boat building, which was endemic and endogenous to the coolies, the machuas, and the Fatimar boats, were really they knew how to build boats, and they knew how to navigate the waters in and around Bombay. And this native boat building tradition really we see later. And there are books which really, and this is one reference, which is History of the Maratha Navy and Merchant Ships by Dr. B.K. Apte. It's an excellent reference material to understand the genres and typologies and evolution of boats and war boats, as well as merchant boats and ships of the Maratha period. And this really allowed to dovetail into the later birth and formation of the Maratha Navy under Chhatrapati Shivaji. So the Maratha Navy was the naval wing of the armed forces of the Maratha Empire from the mid-17th to the mid-18th century. Shivaji Maharaj realized the importance of a strong navy, and the first keel of a Maratha naval ship was laid in a creek near Kalyan in 1654. By 1674, the Maratha Navy had 85 galibots, which are war boats, and 3-masted gurabs or warship. And this prowess was, of course, further bolstered by foremost Admiral Kanoji Angre after Shivaji into the 18th century. So what I'm trying to weave together is this understanding that there was already a native wisdom, an understanding of navigating the waters, as well as building boats of an excellent quality and caliber. And a lot of these indigenous communities, folk, were then drafted into the Maratha Navy, and they were already posing a threat to the Portuguese and even later to the British in these Konkan waters, to sort of establish the pre-British context of this region. And therefore, Bombay's transition, it was a fairly slow transition from the Portuguese period into the British. And if you again see this inset image, the map from the 16th century, you see that on one hand, what is there on the island of Bombay, there's a small footprint of a fort which says Bombay. But to the extreme north, you see a large fort which is Bassein, or Vasai today, which was the Portuguese fort. So the Portuguese were really based around Vasai, and within the islands of Bombay, Mahim notably was one place, and some other small places where they had a presence, but they were not really looking at the potential and tapping into the 7 islands of Bombay in a very strong way, other than this image that you see here, which is often called as the oldest building of the city, recorded, the oldest Bombay mansion. And it has also seen many lives of its own, which was owned by, rented rather, by a Portuguese known, celebrated physician and botanist called Garcia de Horta in the 16th century. This manor then became a part of the Bombay Castle when the British took over, and eventually this is still even 25 years after obtaining Bombay through dowry from the Portuguese in 1662. It's only after 25 years that the British seriously started considering marine activities. Immediately after taking possession of Bombay, the British commenced development of the harbour. A wet dock was created near the manor house, and this is a photo of the manor house, which even till date is a part of the INS Angre, which is the shore establishment of the Indian Navy at the same location. So it has kind of seen continuous use and afterlives. So this was Bombay Castle that then came up around the manor house, which is today kind of hidden behind the town, what was the town hall, and what is Asiatic Society today. So building of a dry dock was conceptualized around this area. in 1677, but actual work started only about 15 years later. A makeshift dock, which you can see in this photograph, a makeshift dock, a sort of mud basin with the tide flowing in and out regularly, was completed by 1693. The setting up of additional repair facilities was a very slow process for the British, as all financial sanctions were to be accorded by the Court of Directors in London, and the mail communication by sea, that itself took about 2 months. So as you can see, what Bombay had and what Bombay's oceanfront, harbour front had by then were very rudimentary marine activities till the end of the 17th century. Both the directors of the East India Company as well as the East India Company here in India as well as in London were really dragging their feet to pump in their infrastructure and finances into building this facility in Bombay. But why is that so? So I'm just going to go now a little bit back in time to establish that though Bombay Castle and around it was just so in a very rudimentary state, the story and all the sort of action was taking place in Surat at that time. And Surat, and this is a sort of riverside view from the Surat castle and the fortifications. And Surat was situated on a bend on the river Tapi, and it was the most important Mughal trading port from the late 16th to the late 17th centuries. So if you see these early maps of Surat, it was a much more well-developed town with 2 rings of fortifications, the English factory, the Dutch factories, the Portuguese. So there was a very important trading hub that was already taking place, and therefore all the British ships would go to Surat for repair and refit, and probably the company did not see the rationale or the investment logic in building a parallel facility in Bombay, which was only about, in today's times, it's a very short journey. So Surat was obviously a much more important center, which had trade going on right from the 15th century with Arabs, and then later all the early European settlers and the ports. But what then began to happen is that we see that in Mughal India, Surat was a very important showcase dock. And at that time, we had the reign of, it started under sort of Jahangir, but it saw its heydays under Aurangzeb. But one seminal, and this is a view of the Surat castle, so you can see how busy a harbour that was. But we see one seminal event or occurrence which shifted and tilted the favor for Bombay in this period. So a key reason which coerced the company at London to build a dry dock in Bombay was the loss of SS Falcon, so a very prestigious ship as part of the British fleet, in transit from Bombay to Surat for repairs in 1686. So the president of the Surat Council and the governor of Bombay at that time, Gerald Ongier, gave comprehensive proposals for the development of Bombay in 1671. And on gaining approval from the directors, measures were initiated to fortify the island, build docks, and develop institutions for its civic and judicial needs. The company officials started repeatedly requesting the directors to shift the company headquarters from Surat to Bombay. But it appears from a letter dated on 30th August 1686, written by Bombay Council to London, that no dock to carry out big repairs had been completed until then, as they proposed sending the ship SS Falcon to Surat for repairs. In their letter to London, dated 29th December 1686, they wrote, "A dry dock for the refitting of ships will be of great use here and may be easily made. This, your deputy governor does believe may be of great use and profit to your honors. And indeed so it must for all ships in these seas, when they know of a dock where they may lay dry securely, will come to clean and repair their ships. The ship SS Falcon had not left her bones here had there been a dock. From this, it appears that this ship must have met with a mishap before she could get to Surat for repairs. In reply to this, the directors of the East India Company once again expressed their desire that Bombay should be made as strong as possible with all facilities for repairs to ships, and in their third and final letter to in 1687, they wrote. So you can sense that there was a lot of urgency, and and I'm kind of just reading a very small excerpt of a series of letters that were exchanged between Surat, Bombay, and London at that time, to sort of impress upon the urgency of having these docking facilities in Bombay. And this final letter said, "Let no time be lost or money spared in making Bombay as strong and defensible as you can, and to be fitted with all conveniences and materials for building and repairing of ships according to our often repeated orders to that purpose. Delay not making a good dry dock and drying drowned lands. If our general be satisfied, it can be done at a charge that will be repaid to us in revenue within 7 to 8 years, as we hope it may in a short time, since land in that place will certainly be worth double what it is now, when our whole trade and shipping is entirely fixed to that place, and it may be made defensible against any enemy, as we would have it, whatever it costs." So this letter, and the tone of the letter, it tells you that there was an urgency, there was a kind of desperation to shift British naval operations from Surat to Bombay. And however, despite this urgency, and despite securing several concessions and clearances from London, they were still not. It took another many years. It took almost 50 years, because this letter that I read out from was from 1687, and the first dry dock did not come up till 1735. So that's about another 50 years was lost and delayed before the first dry dock appeared in Bombay. And why is that so? So what is very interesting is, at that time, obviously the Mughal Empire was in its sort of tapering end, was beginning to realize that they are not that important anymore, and Surat was probably going to lose its importance, and which is what happened while once Bombay was built. So the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb imposed a ban. He issued a farman that banned the movement of skilled labor, artisans, woodworkers from Surat to Bombay. And if they did move, there would be a huge penalty and a tax imposed upon them. And this was a measure to control this rapid exodus on account of new opportunities that were coming up under the British in Bombay. So though the East India Company eventually managed to secure the clearances, the funding, the permission, the lack of skilled Indian good labor, which had to then migrate from Surat, essentially caused further delays in this process. However, in the meantime, once the British started building more actively in Bombay, we see that at least the area around what is known as fort, even today, around the fortified town, saw a lot more active construction, but around you can still see the sort of languid landscape, and there was very little building activity beyond the fort area. However, by 1750, so this was way after, a good 40 years after the demise of Aurangzeb, and the British having now a very firm hold on the Indian subcontinent, post also the Battle of Plassey, if we look at it in a more, just a few years before the Battle of Plassey, if we look at it at Indian context, we see that the town is much more structured. There are fortifications around it, and this box that is there, which was then developed as the dockyard of the time, which even today continues to be the naval dockyard, and it's right placed to the south of the castle, as you see in the 1750 gross plan of Bombay. And at this time, there was a letter that was again sent to by the officials, which said that we are now finishing the proposed offices of the marine yard and the carpenter's yard, 238 feet long and 100 feet broad, with a slip to the sea for the convenience of landing and housing timber or anything else. This indicates that the marine yard came up around this time and comprised quarters for officers and seamen of the Bombay Marine, storehouses, carpenter sheds, and smithy shops. This historic milestone formally signifies the birth of the dockyard in 1735. It also renders the dockyard as the oldest defense establishment in India. So these were sort of what I read out just now, were the infrastructure, the houses, the offices, etc. But what about the dock itself? So this came up by 1750, and this late 18th century painting by Francis Ward shows the Bombay dry dock at its sort of peak, and you can see in great detail the three tiers of the dock: the upper dock, the middle dock, and one ship is being constructed, one is being repaired, the lock gates, the way you would the steps that kind of allowed you to navigate the height from the water. So this is a very important piece of infrastructure that came up, and slowly by 1775 we see another description which says, here is a dockyard, large, with all kinds of naval stores deposited in proper warehouses, together with great quantities of timber and planks for repairing and building ships, as seen as every kind of smaller smith's work. It boasts such a dry dock as perhaps is not to be seen in any part of Europe, either for size or convenient situation. And so by the early 19th, between the late 18th and early 19th century, we see that Asia's first dry dock, the Bombay dock, has been constructed. And we also have a second dock, which the earlier map did not show, but these maps now show two docks placed side by side, which was the Duncan dock, which was added in 1810. It could build larger ships and was declared as a work of superior excellence. The Dock Committee in London declared it as the grandest work of public utility that human labor can produce. It is a testimony to the quality of Indian labor and continues to be in use for docking frigates, petrol vessels, and submarines. So from here, it kind of sets in motion, and you can see other offices, piers, the breakwater, other infrastructure facilities, which then really created a dockyard precinct or a marine precinct, which was very active. The castle was still there. The road around it, which you can see in this map as Apollo Street and Marine Street, it housed some of the earliest buildings. And we will see how, as part of, so this is a construction photo of the expansion of the Duncan dock. So you can see the kind of infrastructure and the labor and the mammoth endeavor that it was to create this facility at the edge of the bay. The logs of wood that I just spoke about, the Indian labor. And though, of course, these were Indian hands building this entire facility, though, of course, the supervision and the more senior officers were all of British origin. Along with that, the development of this precinct. So you have the Dockyard Road, which is this curved road that continues to stand today as Shahid Bhagat Singh Road. You have the clock tower, you have the old church, and next to it, you have the Admiralty House, which is which has also seen many lives, such as the residence of the governor of Bombay, and also for some time in 1878, it was the Bombay High Court, and eventually became the Great Western Hotel. You have the clock tower, which was originally the entrance into the dockyard, the main gate, where the clock tower that you see today, and it was known as the open shutter. So this became an iconic and one of the oldest precincts, urban precincts of Bombay. And along with that, we really see a mature growth and evolution of the fort, the kind of defense it offered now, the kind of surveillance and defense that it offered off the bay, along with the services of the dockyard right next to it. So now I will come to, with this facility having been built, who were these master shipbuilders? Where did they come from, and how did they sort of ally with the British to help them build this vast overseas empire? In their colonial enterprise, the British were ably assisted by the Wadia shipbuilders, who originally came from Surat, and who, drawing on their own skills, local tradition, and raw material available, provided the British Navy and merchants with excellent ships. So 7 generations of hereditary master shipbuilders, Parsi shipbuilders from Surat, which eventually became the famed Wadia family of Bombay, started out as ship master builders of the Bombay dockyard. The first in this line was Lauji Nusarwanji Wadia, who came in 1736 from Surat, and he became the head of the dockyard. And his subsequent generations, each one that you see here, has contributed in a very, very specific way in the major ups and downs that that the dockyard has seen. And in this, I'm going to read out something that really appealed to me in the course of the research, and which we have showcased in the Heritage Hall, is this review, this note in the Calcutta Review, Volume 4 of 1845, which talks about the integrity and the work ethic of the Parsis, something which even today the community is very, very strongly known for. Remarkable as is the fact of Parsis holding a monopoly of all departments in the dockyard, being contrary to the other departments of the state, we are not aware of any instance in which they have abused the almost unlimited confidence reposed in them. The opportunities to do so have been ample. For in an extensive dockyard where large sums of money from the mercantile nature of its multifarious duties are in a continual state of transition, numerous avenues must lie open for the surreptitious accumulation of wealth. But the integrity of the Parsi has remained unsullied. So not only were they bringing to the dockyard excellent shipbuilding traditions, but they were also bringing a very, very strong values and principles of ethics and integrity, which further helped the growth and prosperity of the dockyard at the time. So I'm going to focus of these 7 generations. Of course, they're known for their for the things that I talked about, but 2 aspects and 2 specific scions here as shipbuilders. The second photo that you see of Manikji Lauji Wadia. Now, this man was really important in giving stature not only to the infrastructure that was being built, the ships that were being built, but to the workers of the yard itself. He really helped the Wadias gain in stature and affluence. They were concerned about the entrance and treatment of their support staff and carpenters, and ensured ensured that fair terms and due respect was accorded to yard workers by the colonial establishment. In 1782, Vice Admiral Sir Edward Hughes was highly appreciative of the work done by the Bombay Yard. A raise in salary with gratuity, agricultural land grants, and a special allowance of 2% of the cost of each ship built by them was made available. So not only were they ensuring prosperity for themselves, they were also ensuring within a colonial sort of establishment respect and dignity of labor for the yard workers of the time, who were all Indian naturally. So obviously, as they became prosperous themselves, the family entirely moved to Bombay, relocated from Surat to Bombay, and this was Lauji Wadia's house on Parsi Bazaar Street, which is no more. It sort of was destroyed by a fire in 1933. So you can see that while they built with this expertise fortunes for themselves, they also set a certain glorious and golden era for the dockyard itself. And the other Wadia shipbuilder that I'd like to focus on is Jamshedji Bomanji Wadia. And under him, some of the most important, the phase of history in shipbuilding takes place in the Bombay dockyard. Large consignments of warships were being ordered by the Royal Navy, and vessels built by the Wadias were considered as a serious threat to the English shipbuilding industry. However, though with all of these with all of these accolades to his command, I think he still felt a certain degree of apartheid or discrimination. And therefore, and this is a very famous anecdote, how on the Grand Marquis Cornwallis, which was built under him, he carved these words that this ship was built by a damn black fellow in AD 1800 as a mark of protest against racial bias faced despite professional mastery. He was also responsible for the 46-gun ship HMS Trincomalee and the 74-gun ship HMS Minden. And both these ships have charted stellar journeys of themselves, which I'll come to later. So 7 generations of Wadia master builders have constructed dockyard infrastructure and ships in Bombay that have plied the 7 seas and the shores from the New World to the ancient shores of the China Seas. When their connection with the Bombay dockyard ended in 1913, the Lauji Wadia family had left a legacy of over 400 ships. And if you see the logo of the Wadia group even today, though they have diversified to so many different sectors and verticals, you can still see the sail ship very prominently featuring, and the date of 1736 very prominently featuring on the company's logo even today. So this large volume of ships that were built, of course, so it was very also interesting to therefore look at, and I'm not going to get into the technicalities of these vessel types, but the genealogy of each of these ships that were built were of all different genres, of different capacities, some of Indian craft, some borrowing from European craft, some for war, some for trade and merchant purposes, for commercial purposes. So there was this entire very vast inventory of ships that were being produced over 150 years almost, in which was that golden era. And some of these ships, of course, what I call the jewels of the sea, which were iconic sail ships built by the yard. One of this, of course, these ships were built both for to serve the colonial establishment and for being inducted into the Royal Navy, but also to ward off enemies at home and in the domestic waters. So if you see this first ship that was built in the in the Bombay dock in 1746, which is the HCS, which is the Honorable Company, which is the East India Company's ship called HCS Drake. So this was essentially built. There's a very interesting anecdote here, which was launched by Lauji Wadia in 1748. And the main reason, and this last paragraph is very important, in the beginning of 1749, the Bombay Council once again had to consider seriously the strength of their marine force to protect commerce on the Malabar coast against the depredations of Angria, which is Kanoji Angre and the Maratha navy, who most of these colonial letters and documents refer to as pirates, many of whom possessed cruisers of considerable strength. Angria, in particular, was at that time a formidable and dangerous enemy. They therefore decided to maintain a force of 4 capital ships, 4 ketches of sloops, and 10 gallivats. So Drake was built in this context to also bolster the fleet in and around the Bombay waters to protect against Maratha attacks. But also, most of the large warships were feeding into the empire and various charting global waters across the empire. And therefore, what was really interesting for me to find here was the ways in which the dockyard in Bombay was also in sustaining the empire, financially from the profit point of view, but also through its very strategic location. So one of the bulwark in maintaining and sustaining a navy is a robust dockyard. The yard at Bombay was a pivotal institution in the sustenance of the British Empire, manned and operated almost entirely by Indian people. So you can see these two routes. The route in orange is the earlier traditional route which followed around the Cape of Good Hope. And then later, once the Suez Canal opened, the considerable efficiency that was achieved by cutting down time and distance significantly. And both situations, Bombay's strategic location really helped it to even later gaining the Urbs Prima status that it that was given to it. And in this sense, there are each of these warships that were built here have its own sort of trajectory and trail of having gone right from to the US, to the West Indies, to China, and various parts. And I'm going to only come to some of them due to paucity of time, but I would encourage you all to take a look at this sometime later if you all are able to visit the Heritage Hall. And each of these ships, those who are sort of early sail ship, warship enthusiasts, there is a lot of documented and recorded history on each of these early warships, which were built in Bombay, who they were led by, which wars they fought, all of their physical sort of information that was available. But 2 or 3 quickly instances that I'm going to cite here in terms of how Bombay really bolstered its position was one in the way it became important in the Indian Ocean region to overcome the French in the Indian Ocean. And as you can see that there was this battle in the South China Sea, and the disadvantage that the French had is that their injured ships for replenishment of for goods, as well as for any damage that their ships had faced, they would have had to go all the way to Mauritius, which was a much longer route than for the British ships, which could go through the Strait of Malacca and to Bombay. So this was another reason that gave a very important locational advantage for superior repair, refit, and replenishment facilities at the Bombay dockyard to sustain long periods of oceanic conflict. The French were handicapped by supply problems resulting from a lack of naval stores and food supplies. Necessity for damaged warships to return all the way to Mauritius for repair resulted in much slower turnaround time for their navy. And in this way, the British were able to gain control and supremacy slowly over the Indian Ocean. The other forging of alliances in a way to get control over the Indian Ocean region. And one of the examples of this is to forge alliance with the Sultan of Oman to drive out the Portuguese from the Indian Ocean waters. So the Portuguese were also enemies of the Omanis, so to say. The Omanis had successfully expelled the Portuguese colonial powers from Muscat in the 17th century, and they became an ally to the East India Company in driving them out of Indian waters as well. It is understood that the sultans of Oman were private clients of the Bombay Dockyard and having commissioned many merchant and warships built under the Wadias. The most iconic is this ship that you see, which is the Sultana, and it occurs on many of such stamps and other important commemorative coins of the Oman Sultanate of the period. So Sultana is important because it was built in 1833 in the Bombay Dockyard for Sultan Syed's Muscat Navy. It was the first Arab ship to sail for diplomatic missions to New York in 1840 and London in 1842, and considered as a national symbol for the country. And to sort of honor that connection, there is a high quality scale model even today of Sultana displayed at the Oman and the World Gallery of the National Museum, Sultanate of Oman in Muscat. So you can see the various ways that the British were allying or strategically gaining control of the Indian Ocean waters. And the Bombay Dockyard was having a very stellar role to play in all of these. So not only were there warships, but there were also armed commercial vessels, which were bringing trade and merchandise from England through via the Cape of Good Hope to India. They were known as East India Men, and a multiple East India Men were built at the Bombay Dockyard, such as the notable amounts them were Surat Castle, Bombay, and Lodji family. But one of the most interesting the ships that I find very interesting personally was the HMS Madras, which was later rechristened to the HMS Mini. So Madras was renamed as Mini. It was the largest ship, one of the last ships built by the sail ships built by the Bombay Dockyard in 1848. It was under Kasarji Rustamji Wadia. She was launched in 1848, commissioned under the Royal Navy. Now, the interesting thing that I find here is that we spoke about how this ship gets an entire spread, a full page in the Illustrated London News when it was launched, along with the photograph of the builder. So you can see from the kind of fight for dignity that the Wadia shipbuilders were trying to get for themselves, you really see them also now featuring very prominently. And snippets from newspapers where the launch of this ship was really celebrated kind of says that on the day of its launch, if you see the second paragraph that I've highlighted, by 9 o'clock on the morning of Saturday, all the roads and avenues leading to the dockyard were seen crowded with people anxious to witness the launch, of whom there must have been upwards of 1 lakh. So more than 1 lakh people from the city came for the launch of this ship. And that is really very telling of this superiority and that was enjoyed. And other than fighting wars and charting global waters, this is another aspect that really caught my eye. This is actually a page from the British Museum's website. So the HMS Mini has a recorded history of also having sailed from Bombay for England in August 1849 with Persian artifacts from the British Museum. They were a set of Assyrian bas-reliefs from the reign of Ashur-nasir-pal from the 9th century BC that were excavated and found during archaeological surveys. So this entry on the British Museum website very interestingly shows that how these bas reliefs were discovered in 1846, dispatched from the site from Basra to Bombay in another ship called the Clive, and then to England on the HMS Mini in 1849. So these are also the very, very interesting cross cultural connections that ships built in the Bombay dockyard were making with the India and the world in a sense, really at a very, very early state. Now, coming to sort of 20th century developments and the connection with the networks, the larger networks of the empire. And in the early 20th century, we see that we have the railroad now as well. And the Ballard Mole, Pier Mole was a station that was built right next to this marine precinct by the Mumbai Port Trust Railway in the Ballard Bandar. The Frontier Mail debuted here on the 1st of September 1928, running between Mumbai and Peshawar. Passengers could get off their steamers from London at the Ballard Pier and conveniently walk across to board the train, signifying connections between the Dockyard precinct and the wider networks of empire. So by this time, the precinct was, of course, expanding. The Dockyard was building a certain kinds of ship. There are other, the Bombay Port Trust had been set up, and Mazgaon Dock was building ships. So the marine activity had obviously taken up a much more areas along the waterfront, and that is not forming the scope of my talk today. My talk is focused on the dockyard, which became the naval dockyard eventually. So you can see this, the train station, which is the Ballard Pier Mole, which was also set up on this site. So there are many ways in which the dockyard therefore made its linkages with networks of the empire. And this I thought was very, very interesting in the global context. And then, of course, its role and service during the world wars. And the two world wars were watershed in the evolution of the Bombay dockyard from 1914 to 1918, and then again from 1939 to 1945. It carried out major refits of vessels that were either severely damaged during operations at sea or needed urgent maintenance. So in the First World War, you can see here how fishing vessels were then converted to minesweepers in the yard. The yard employed close to 6,000 personnel in the interwar period. Alterations included equipping transport ships, hospital ships, merchant vessels, admiralty vessels, and even foreign vessels and Chinese ships. The adjoining docks, which had evolved by then, Hughes Dock and Alexandra Dock of the Bombay Port Trust, were also used to bear the additional workload. So these were some wartime contributions that took place in the Bombay dockyard at Yes, and this is a very small snippet to give you a flavor of that. Dockyards have been switched in naval action in the Indian Ocean and the Java Sea. Since the fall of Singapore, vessels of the United Nations have had only the facilities of the British naval base at Colombo and India's scattered shipyards for fueling, servicing, and repair. And then eventually we come to this period of the changeover when the Royal Indian Marine was changed to the Royal Indian Navy, and then eventually in 1850 when we see the changeover to the Republic and the birth of the Indian Navy. And what to me was a very interesting aspect of this period was the role of the dockyard in ensuring the division and distribution of naval assets during partition. And this is something we don't really understand or talk about at all. We understand partition in aspects of transport and displacement of people, but the way in which the dockyard navigated and spearheaded the division, so one third of its fleet had to be divided, and associate assets of the British Royal Indian Navy was to be made seaworthy to journey to the two major naval bases of East and West Pakistan of that time, which was Karachi and Chittagong. And so the Indian Navy, the Royal Indian Navy lost much of its fleet in this way during partition, but obviously you cannot partition a physical asset and infrastructure such as the dockyard. So obviously the dockyard remained with India, but it spearheaded this seaworthiness of all of these assets to travel to the two new port cities, and also therefore gave India an advantage in going ahead as an independent nation, which is a very, very mature and a very, very robust facility. So on that note, I'll just come to some of my concluding slides now, where, as you can see, the history of the dockyard, and therefore in many ways of Bombay itself being a port city with a very important maritime city, it's almost closely linked to all the evolutions that the presence of a navy in this city has seen, right from the East India Company's marine right up to the Indian Navy. And the two earliest docks, which you see here in this modern photograph, which is the Duncan dock and the Bombay dock, continue to refit and repair modern ships of the Indian Navy, and they have upgraded to serve and meet the demands of the nation. And these walls, this very prominent curved wall, which forms a very important part of the urban form of the town and this Kala Ghodia era today, hosts almost it's as old as the islands of Bombay itself, and in terms of its recent recorded, in terms of its recorded history. So on that note, I'm going to close my talk here, and it's a very important legacy that this city has, and therefore the Naval Dockyard Mumbai is far more than a collection of buildings, facilities, machinery, and personnel. It is a living, breathing organism that has stood the test and vagaries of time, and much akin to the glorious and iconic ships it once built, has truly sailed through time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamalika, for such a fascinating talk. While most of us might have been to the Kala Ghoda area and we've seen those walls, but we did not know what really stood beyond those. So it was really nice to know about those ships that were built in. I would like to move on to certain questions that are there for you in the chat box. Um, the first one is by Atma. He's asking, when was this photo of the manor house clicked? The manor house of Garcia Dorta?
Okay. So I'm assuming that these are all photographs which were clicked once photography came into play. So it would be maybe a late 19th, a 19th century photograph.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. Okay. Pabitra has a question about the Vadia, that did he die at the age of 29? And also, did he build a ship at the age of 8?
Which Wadia is this?
The last Vadia that you spoke about, I
The
guess.
last Wadia I spoke about was Kursit Ji, who was involved in building the HMS Madras, but he was much older, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Pavitra, is it about the last Vadia only? If you are there, you can unmute yourself. Okay. Moving on to our next question. Nilofer is
Hello.
asking that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it is about Jamshed Bomanji Wadia, which you say 1792 to 1821. He built a ship in 1800. His life is shown as 1792 to 1821.
No. So that's not his life. That is the period in which he was master builder of the dockyard.
Okay. Okay. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Okay. Yeah, but normally you specify whether it's his age or
No, but in this context, because I'm talking about 7 generations of master builders, the dates
okay.
refer to one transitioned to the next.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
At present, we do have a dockyard station which on the local train lines. So is it the same station that you've shown in the photograph?
So that station does not exist anymore. So what exists in its place today is the international cruise terminal.
I see. But there is no railway line there anymore,
No,
is it?
no.
Okay. And that cruise terminal is just next to the sea. Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
There's another question. Somebody is asking, where were the logs of timber brought for the shipbuilding? It must have deforested entire forest areas, is what
So this
somebody
is
asked.
a point I did not include here because I thought, it's kind of well known, this aspect. But the forests of basically what we understand is the forests of Malabar. So Tellicherry is a very specific region from which essentially in and around the dense forests of Kerala, where you have large mature trees which would have been able to give you both the length and the girth of the strength of the kind of logs that you require. So there is documented history which talks about the trees from this Tellicherry region.
Okay. There's another question. Says, why were the docks at the east coast of Mumbai?
Okay, I think there's someone else who's already answered it, saying that this eastern part of the bay was a natural harbor. It was much calmer, the placid waters, unlike the western side, which was the back bay, which was a rougher sea.
Okay. And then there's another question by Keshav saying, how did the name Apollo come? So for the Apollo gate, how did the name Apollo come?
I'm not very sure.
Atma is saying that it has come from a fish. So there was a fish called palva fish, which was so the Portuguese could not pronounce it, so it becomes polem, and later on is anglicized by the Brits, saying Apollo. So the name Apollo comes from there. Yeah, and I'm just checking for another question. Yeah, Kerala had a boat building history from ancient times. Is it?
Well, Kerala did also because the Europeans landed there first, right? With Vasco da Gama and the entire Portuguese in the European history. They had Chinese and Arabs trading there even before the Europeans came. So it was definitely a seafaring tradition that was very long.
Okay. Okay, there's another question by Ashish Srinivasan. Says, I'm not sure if it's okay. I was asking about the middle ground. He's asking about the middle ground. This is where the flag salute is made nowadays to the flag of CNC West.
True. What is the question? But sir, I did not understand the question. You're right that the middle ground is where the flag salute is.
So he's asking if you can explain more about the middle ground.
So the middle ground and the oyster rock, these were sort of two places, two sort of rocks and natural formations in the water where batteries were set up as for surveillance for attacks against what they used to call the pirates, and essentially patrolling of who's entering the harbor. And that is where therefore you see today two forts, two sea forts which exist in the middle of the harbor. And one of it, which is middle ground, as he rightly said, is used to as the flag salute for the CNC.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Ashish. We have a last question saying, can Pavitra get a detailed explanation about Aurangzeb's Farman?
So, in fact, that is something that the specific wordage, etc., even I'm looking for. I came across this reference in the research document on the Wadias themselves. There's a very thorough book available on the history of shipbuilding of the Wadia family. So, if anyone is able to help with the exact detailed farman and what it was, I'd be happy to have that as well.
Sure. Yuval Shah is asking if you can get an access to the PDF of the maps and pictures that you have use. So is it available on internet or anywhere that you
So
can get an access to?
most of these maps and photographs now are widely available through open source networks, as well as through foreign archives like British Library. A lot of these libraries have made their archives public for academic and research use. So they're all really commonly available. Many of them. Some are not. You'll have to look at specific books and archives.
Okay, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so there are no questions. There are no more questions. So thank you, Kamalika, again for a fascinating talk and for accepting the invitation by Khaki. Your talk will soon be available on YouTube. So in case if anybody wants to share, can share it on Tuesday. It will be available on YouTube soon. Yeah, with this, we come to an end to today's talk. Please stay tuned and join us for the next talk, that is the 200 talk. Yeah, thank you so much and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.